Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass. Thank you for watching today's brief ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, late this afternoon here on Monday, we got the new long-range outlook from the ECMWF. We call this the ECMWF weeklies. I'd like to point out a couple of important shifts we saw in the forecast. While this area is expected to continue to stay quite active, models really backed off on bringing better rains to parts of California and now came up with a drier signal for parts of the south, here from Texas all the way over to almost southern Georgia. Precipitation didn't change too much for the Pacific Northwest overall, and neither did the longer range temperature pattern, which is shown to you right here. But there are some differences. There we go. There are some differences that I would like to discuss, and I want to tell you what I think most of this model forecast is based upon. I think it has everything to do with what's going on with La Nina. We've lost a signal of what's going on in the tropics from the MJO. Remember, it kind of runs from Africa out here into the Central Pacific, phase 1 to phase 8. And the models, I think, are taking the more dominant signal in their own forecast of the colder waters here, indicative of La Nina, and producing that forecast. And this is what I mean. You see, when you look historically, we've had several years where we've had fading La Ninas going into February and March. And so I pulled them all off and made a composite map for you. What it tends to favor is a ridge that's going to slide over here and flow that kind of comes around like this. Now, I think that this upcoming forecast has a relatively high failure mode. And the reason why I stress that is because we have a lot of competing factors. What I like about this is there's quite a bit of warm water here. That would make sense. La Ninas tend to do this. Plus, there's cold water in the Gulf of Alaska. That's supportive of this trough. That would then give us kind of ridges that kind of rebound on the downwind side over here. So there's things that make sense, but there's a few things that aren't making any sense. And that basically comes down to discussion of where that La Nina and the MJO interaction is going to play out. And the 12Z ECMWF today all of a sudden returned. Look at these trade winds, these strong trade winds into this area. Now, if you just look where they meet with the warmer colors, those westerlies, is right here over phases 4 and 5. And that would be a change over where we've seen the MJO for so long. It's been over here in phase 7 for such a very long time before it collapsed. Now, why I think this is important is that this might be a near-term factor that's going to help us understand eventually where the ridge in the Pacific is going to be. Will it be over the Aleutian Islands, which is ideal for everybody, in my opinion, or will it be, over the West Coast again, where it's spent much of the month of January? What we can do is we can just say this. If you end up with this pattern, if La Nina wins the day and that ridge goes west, this is what you tend to get. Wetter in the northwest, near normal across much of the central United States, and then you tend to have an active storm track here, almost exactly what the long-range European was picking up on. Unfortunately, this is drier for Texas. This is drier for the southwest into California because there's no subtropical jet stream there. And what I'm trying to make a case for here is that this forecast I shared with you, looking at that precipitation pattern, this would be exactly what you draw up if La Nina was the most dominant factor. And the MJO was spending time in phases 7 or phase 8. It's very rare that MJO goes back to phase 5 once you get past the peak of La Nina, and that's going to be a tough point to forecast moving forward. We do know this, that much of this month has been on the drier side for several large regions, especially in the west, down here in the southern plains, and even right here in parts of the Midwest. We've largely been corrective on our drought, coming into parts of the mid-Atlantic, back toward, farther to the west of there. That's because the jet streams just favored a ridge over the west. It's dug down here. We've been blocked up in the North Atlantic. There's been a ridge here and a trough to the south, so the flow dips around and does something like that and doesn't want to move forward. So we got stuck in this trough in this section of the country for a while, and that's kept things drier where there's a lot of convergent flow here, and that's allowed some drought to expand. So over the month of January so far, or at least the end of December through January, we've continued to see the drought worsening here in the southern plains of the United States. In terms of snowpack, let's zoom out on that. We can see that this is where we currently sit through early this morning today on the 24th. And again, some of the more familiar things we've been talking about. Look at all the snow that's come into this part of the mid-Atlantic and out of Tennessee, Kentucky, while north of it here, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, back into Missouri, really missing out. There's some drier places in through here as well. But something to take note of, the snowpack that is in this area is substantially better than it was a year ago. Same thing for the western part of the United States. If we compare it to normal, you can kind of see on this map, let's shrink that up one more time, there we go, the percent of normal through this point in the year. So again, this is through the 24th, comparing all previous years, and you kind of get a sense of who's got the snow and who hasn't had the snow. And this week ahead, we're going to see relatively drier conditions for most of the United States. There's going to be some snow that'll push up against the Rockies here, and a little system that's going to come out here into Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska. But that'll all be on the backside of a high pressure cell. And we're going to watch two separate coastal lows, one coming through here at the beginning of the week, and one forming at the end of the week that's going to run right up the coast. It's going to really potentially impact parts of New England. But until this ridge in the west breaks down, and that is what I'm calling into question, the west is going to continue to favor drier conditions. Let's do a multi-model analysis to see how this is all going to shake down. So here's the snow that moved through the Great Lakes states this morning. This is actually what caused me a 4-hour delay in flights today because of the snow coming over Chicago. But as that moves on off to the east, we see our first coastal low taking shape, both models. See it in both models here. But the high pressure that's coming in behind this is dominant, and it just pushes it out in both models. What we do have to watch for, though, if I go back here, is look, coming through Colorado on Tuesday night into Wednesday, or Tuesday into Wednesday, we see this feature coming through here delivering some light snow. We'll take a look at the snowfall totals in a few moments. So that pushes on through. Little clipper goes up into the Hudson Bay, both models, and watch this. That clipper ends up stringing a front, comes all the way down here and connects into Texas. See it there? And that front serves as the kind of tail end of a lifting point that's going to team up with an upper level trough that starts to build this coastal low. Now, by Friday evening, we're starting to see that coastal low taking shape from the Gulf Coast into the southeast and possibly here into kind of the mid-Atlantic. The differences in the models, the European sends it way offshore, whereas the GFS holds it closer to the shore. And either is a possibility, to be honest. We could see either of these two things occurring. And then that races up the coast. Okay, so this is going to be, let's get the timing down here. Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday midday, Saturday evening, getting into Sunday morning. So that's this weekend system we're going to have to watch all week. Behind it, we're going to do this quick. You're going to see another system pulling into the northwest. We haven't seen that in a while, which suggests that that ridge is going to break down at least temporarily. Now, on that coastal low, watch out for the extent of the high pressure on the backside. If this fades and moves west, then that'll take this, which is the European Ensemble's cluster of low pressure centers, back here. But as it stands, right now the model's putting down the heaviest snow, basically from like Delaware into New England. This is the probability of getting 3 inches of snow through the next 7 days. So it's Great Lakes, lake effect snow. We've been talking a lot about that. But the ridge in the west, diving down like this, we're only getting snow here because of upslope flow around a big high pressure cell. And you get that high pressure because of convergence in the flow. Now, is that going to change? We're going to answer that in just a few moments. First, total precip. This is through the next 7 days. Again, our biggest unknown will be right in through here. We'll just have to wait to see later in the week where that low ends up taking shape. But bringing in some precipitation to the Gulf Coast is needed. Maybe picking up a ½ inch to 1.5 inches there. All this is coming in on snow on the backside of that high pressure cell. Got our lake effect going here. And again, some early snow today. But what we need to see is a breakdown in the western ridge. And we start to see that once we get fully into week 2. See, if I just play the operational run out, see what's showing up here? That would indicate some sense of a trough diving into the central part of the United States. Now, this is what the 12Z model run did, exactly that. But this is a major shift over what we had been seeing, which was keeping this trough farther to the west longer into February. But look at what the 12Z is trying to return here. This is a pretty amplified pattern with this trough moving through it. The previous run, look at the difference. This is how much the heights have increased compared to the 0Z run today. That is what's making long-range predictability absolutely terrible right now. When I say long-range, I'm sorry. Beyond day 7 or day 8, this model flip-flop from the 12Z back to the 0Z. So the models for week 2 have now trended drier for California, but they still have this system ejecting sometime after, day 7, 8, or 9 coming into this area, potentially being very disruptive. So again, that's going to be in that first week of February. We're talking about that very disruptive system. But this is a change that's really impacting not only the precipitation forecast, but also the temperature. So let's talk about temperatures. We saw these highs today. As we get into Tuesday, that's our next big Arctic high coming through, dropping the temperatures off. And to Wednesday, that moves east and a big warm-up following it. And that warm-up, we'll see it again later in the week. That's Thursday getting into Friday and Saturday. Look at the heat coming back into the Central Plains as the coldest air moves its way over to the east again. Highly volatile temperature pattern this week. But when we think about where this is going, this is the day 5 through 10 from the 12Z Euro. So there's some mild air coming in here, but quite a bit of colder air from the Canadian Prairie into the east. But look at this. This is the new day 10 through 15. This was the previous run. That's the difference when they had a trough, in place here, to now replacing that with a ridge. So the old run is seen here. That's the new run. So if you subscribe to my morning reports, I showed you this because we saw that trend all weekend long. So we need to know if the new run is just a fluke. Sometimes that happens, or if we have a more important pattern change to be talking about. I'll say this polar vortex still quite strong and steady and not a major component in the tropospheric flow. It has been undisrupted so far this year. Unlike 1 year ago, where right now we were doing the forecast for early February, which included a massive polar vortex disruption that ended up being that record-setting event of cold from the prairie all the way to the Gulf Coast. So that's it. I'll talk to you again on Thursday. We'll have new updates and get a better idea on how this pattern is eventually going to shift into February. I'll talk to you then. Thank you.